right, this video is how to build with clay. The first order of business is to get clay that is the right consistency. Oh, you know what? This is actually dried out for a few minutes. This isn't so bad. This clay was really wet, and so like anytime you stick your finger in it, a lot of clay sticks to your finger. So if that's happening to you, your clay might be a little bit wet. These pallets, luckily, are pretty dry that we're working on. So what you could do with the really wet clay is just kind of slam it into the pallet like that. And you can see that that wood looks wet and it will absorb some of that excess water. Another thing that pounding of clay does is it kind of mixes the wet with dry clay, making sure it's all like the same consistency. This is actually probably perfect consistency now. You want it about the consistency of Play-Doh. If it's very hard for you to mush, like if it would be hard for you to make, shapes out of, or if you start forming these shapes and there's a lot of cracks in them and you can't smooth out the cracks, then it might be a little bit too dry. So if it feels hard to mush around, this one has some like hard pieces in the middle, it seems like. This would probably need to be mixed a little bit more. This is actually just a different kind of clay. I mean, they're pretty much similar. It was just like a newer batch that was darker gray. But this one is the perfect consistency for me. So I'm going to start working with this one. The two kinds of clay building that I'm mainly going to work with, well, actually, I guess there's three. I'm going to do pinch pot, coil, and slab building. To start off our clay sculptures, we're going to do animals. And we're just going to do the bust of an animal, which is basically just like the chest, neck, and head of the animal. So the first thing we're going to start with is a pinch pot, which is basically going to be like an upside down bowl. And that's going to be the base for our sculpture that we're going to then build on, okay? All right, so first thing, guys, I'm just going to take a lump of clay and roll it into a ball. This would be a good amount of clay for the base, kind of filling your palm up. This would be more like head size. And by the way, I am going to do a pinch pot for the head. So if you have another piece of clay like this off to the side, that'd be about the amount for a head, about the amount for a base. So anyway, so I've rolled it into a sphere. It doesn't have to be perfect. Obviously mine is kind of lumpy, not perfect. And then to start your pinch pot, you're going to start with a pinch. I'm going to pinch my thumb, maybe a little bit more than halfway. Now, nothing about these walls looks even in consistency at this moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch and turn, pinch and turn. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pinch on the outside to keep the walls from getting too thick. And I'm also trying to cup with my opposite hand. Because a lot of times when people do this, it keeps turning into like a plate as opposed to a bowl. So I'm kind of guiding it with both my hands to make sure that the walls don't get too wide. Now, as you can see, the walls are even in thickness to my finger. That is the maximum width of anything that we're building with clay. The thickness should be even to that of your finger. So there's an easy way to measure that. Make sure that it's not too thick at the top. A lot of people neglect pushing down as they're doing this. So if you feel a thick spot, just kind of thin that out. Try to make sure they're as even as possible. And once you have a nice, sturdy, thick-walled base, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to plop it down on the surface like that. In doing that, that will make sure that the sculpture doesn't rock while it's sitting there, okay? Now, our next objectives will be to add the neck or the head. One of the tools we're going to be using on this project is a bent paper clip. Normal people who work in ceramics would call this a needle tool, but ours is kind of like a homemade needle tool. So where you're going to add the neck or the head, you could cut out a hole. If you know that you're going to have a fairly skinny neck or a very small head, it doesn't necessarily need to be hollow on the inside. So let's say this is my giraffe neck. It's roughly the same width as my finger, so I do not need to make it hollow. I can just attach it on there, okay? By the way, anything that you're attaching should be slipped and scored. It's a process where you scratch the surfaces, deep gouges that are going to touch, and then you fill them in with slip. Slip is this stuff right here. It's a mixture of clay and water to the consistency of like cake batter, pancake batter, something like that. I use the back of the brush to do my mixing, and then I'm going to use the tip of the brush for painting it on the clay. I usually have a sponge around, but I don't have that right now. I'll get that for my next video. So anyway, I'm going to paint on the slip on this surface. I'm going to paint the slip on this surface, and then I can attach my two, whatever it is, if this is a tail or a neck. I'm really, really going to want to press those together. If you have excess slip, you can remove it. And then eventually these two pieces could be smoothed out together. That slip, what that does, and that score, it's going to make sure that whatever you're attaching is really, really firmly attached. Clay, as it dries, it loses the water, and so it shrinks a little bit. And so if it does that, your neck and head will go rolling off if you don't do the slip and score, okay? All right, so there's necks if you want a skinny neck. If you wanted to make a really thick neck, Then you would have to make it hollow. So let's say my neck was going to be wider than the width of my finger. What I could do is I could actually just take whatever size neck I want, flatten it into like a slab of clay. You could wrap it around your finger if you want, just kind of pinch these together. Now ideally this would also be slipped and scored, but just for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to smear these together really well. If the clay is pretty wet, this would probably work out just fine. It's not like the neck's going to fall apart at the seam. And then I would slip and score and add my neck on here. Now here's a confusing part. See how that's closed in there? At no point in building with clay do you want to trap air somewhere. You want air to always be able to escape. The water that's in the clay and oxygen molecules both obviously have oxygen, and so oxygen, when it heats up, it expands. So if I was to say attach the head here and trap air in there, it would blow up in the kiln like a bomb, okay? So anyway, and it would probably take a sculpture or two down next to it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to lightly mark like the opening inside that neck there, and then I'm going to pick up the neck and I'm going to cut that opening with my paperclip tool, okay? So there's two kinds of necks you could do, the wide neck or the long neck. You are to decide which kind of neck you need to make, okay? And then like I said, if I wanted to attach this neck, I would go ahead and slip and score, scratch those edges, paint on the slip, and then, you know, obviously I'd scratch this edge too. Let's pretend I did that. I scratched the paperclip, I painted the slip, yada, 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 attached it on, it's firmly attached, okay? Pretend. I'm just gonna jump ahead though. Okay, so those are two kinds of necks. Now to create your head, what you're gonna do is you're gonna use a little bit less clay obviously than you used on the base. If your base ended up kind of small, my base is probably about medium size, then you'd wanna maybe take a little bit more away from your head clay too, because the heavier the head is, the more likely it's like gonna tip over, okay? All right, so once you start with your little ball of clay for your head, remember we're gonna make this a pinch pot. So I'm gonna punch my thumb in the center, and then I'm gonna pinch and turn, pinch and turn, pinch and turn. Now, once you've made the head into a bowl shape, and by the way, really try to make sure that these walls are even in thickness or you're gonna end up with a super lumpy head, okay? The more even they are, the more likely this is to look like a head. Okay, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna make this a hollowed out sphere, okay? I'm gonna put all my fingers around the edges, and then I'm just gonna bend this inward on all sides. I'm trying to bend it evenly. If there's one part that's not going in, I'm gonna go back and give a little extra pressure to that one area. So now I basically have a hollowed sphere. You could slip and score and attach this and then attach on a snout of your liking. Maybe I wanna do like an open dog snout, or I don't know, like a crocodile snout, whatever you wanna add on, you can add on your snout, okay? But another thing you could do that might make your life a little easier is you could just form this head into your snout if you wanted. So I'm just put my pinky finger up inside there and I'm just kind of pinching this out. Cat or feline snouts tend to be more rounded. Dog snouts like wolves or coyotes or Dalmatians or whatever, those ones are a little bit more geometric, where they look a little bit more rectangular at the tip. Same with like a bear snout's kind of rectangular. Horses are kind of rounded. So there's whatever kind of head I'm making. I would slip and score and attach that on. Now pretend I went through the process of both surfaces that touch. I do the scratching, which is the scoring. And then I go in, I paint on my slip. I'm really gonna do a good job of attaching these. Oh yeah, be generous with that slip. Get that really in those grooves, okay? And then I'm gonna attach, smear them out. Oh, they look beautiful. They're never gonna fall apart, okay? All right, another way you can make snouts is any way you want to. If you wanted to like just add on like a little cat snout that's nice and round, I'm gonna give this head another snout on the side. Pretend I just wanted a snout over there. I could add on a snout like this. The only thing you don't wanna do is trap air. So make sure the air can get out below, or you could cut the mouth open and make more of like an open mouth, and then the air would surely be able to escape, okay? Make sure that after you attach your head and snout and neck, make sure like use the back of your paintbrush, kind of poke it up in there and be like, oh yeah, I can move that around inside. Air will surely be able to escape out that hole, okay? So that's like the hardest part, is just getting the base made, getting the neck and head attached. By the way, if you don't want a really long neck like that, you could also just attach the head right to the body. I don't know if I mentioned that or not, but feel free if you want to like, I'm going to review the pinch pot because I feel like you guys probably will need to see that again anyway. But to do a pinch pot, you roll a ball of clay like this, and then you punch your finger in the center, pinch and turn, pinch and turn, pinch and turn. As I'm doing this, I'm feeling for thicker areas and I'm trying to say, oh yeah, that's a little thick there. I'm gonna pinch that area a little bit harder. I'm trying to make the walls even in thickness. Then you're gonna gradually kind of bend these walls in to make a hollowed out sphere. Now you can make your head, slip and score and attach it, and then attach the snout. Or if you want to, you can just make your snout right away. Obviously, if you have an elephant snout or something, you know, really profound, you might want to just make a separate snout. Yeah, slip and score and attach on. You can make a pointy bird beak or a fish face or whatever kind of head you want to make on there. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to add detailed features on here now. So teachers, if you're showing this in other classrooms, you might want to pause it, and then we'll go back to like more detailed features when you're ready. But I'm going to go ahead and just keep trucking. Okay, boys and girls, one thing that I forgot that's really important when dealing with clay is cleanup and storage. So make sure when you're working that you're mainly working on the palette, not on the table. If a piece falls on there, that's fine, but if you're smushing the clay into the table, it becomes very hard to clean. Make sure when you're done, close up your slip cups so that they're not getting spilled all over the place. Paintbrushes and your sponges can get stored in these buckets that are going to be on your table. You're going to need your sponge though for a minute. So let's say I'm going to store this clay sculpture and my extra clay in here. Now this is a lot of extra clay. You guys probably won't end up with this much, but I needed a lot for all this demonstration action. So here's all my extra clay. What I would want to do, because I'm not done building, pretend, I would wet down my sculpture. So you're going to dribble clay over, and I'm going to dribble water over my extra clay. You want to make sure that's good and wet for the next day. If your palette is dry like mine, you might want to let that sit for a minute or two, because that wood is going to soak up some of that moisture, and then come back and give it a little bit more over those, okay? The next day you might find that the clay is pretty dry. However, like on day 3 or day 2 of working with it, you'll be like, oh, okay, now my palette is not soaking up as much of the water as it was before. Then what we're going to do next is you're going to store these guys in a plastic bag. When you have this plastic bag, what I would suggest doing is kind of opening up the plastic bag, going all the way down to the bottom like this, so that you can see the bottom like exposed up here, almost like you're putting on your sock. You know how you like roll down a sock and you put your toe into the end? That's what we're going to do with this palette. So then, very carefully, without mushing my antlers in that, I'm going to put that palette in towards the bottom of the bag, and I'm very carefully going to walk this over. Oh, my antlers fell off. That might happen to you guys when you're storing. Just reattach them tomorrow. And on the day that we go to let things dry, obviously there won't be a bag over it, so they won't get mushed up. Now, you don't want to knot your bag. You just want to twist the bag and then wrap it underneath like this. Then just remember where you store it in the art room. And then that bag over it with this twist should keep things moist under there. You don't want the clay drying out, or it'll be all crumbly and you won't be able to add on to it, okay? Make sure that your paper clip either gets stored on top of your bag if you don't want it getting wet, or you can put it in there with your clay sculpture so you have it to work with the next day. And then use your sponge and your bucket to wipe off anything on your table, okay? Another thing you have to do is, if your water in here is clean, I want you to get off all the visible clay on your hands before you go wash in the sink. If you're washing clay down a sink, it's going to jam up those pipes, and eventually those pipes will need to be replaced. So that is no bueno, okay? So you're going to do a pre-rinse in the hand washing buckets at the back of the room, then wash with soap, okay? And then also make sure you use your bucket at your table to wipe up any clay that is on your table, okay? Dried clay, wet clay, make sure if you have dry clay, just brush it into the garbage, and make sure your table's clean when you're done.